Welcome everyone, and today's session is with Juliana Smith, who is going to be taking us through optimizing Primavera P6 reporting with Power BI.
Yes, my name is Juliana Smith. I'm a senior consultant at Turner & Townsend, working with data automation and analytics. I've been working with data for over 15 years now across multiple industries. And I started using Power BI fairly recently, back in 2020. Today, I'm here to talk about how we can enhance Primavera P6 reporting using Power BI. And I'm aiming to help you to transform the data into actionable insights. Just bear in mind that I'm not a P6 user, so a few details they are specific for P6 I may not be able to answer. Just a quick, I'm going to quickly talk you through what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to do a quick introduction. I'm going to talk about connecting Power BI to P6. There are different ways of doing that. A quick demonstration. So I'm going to be transforming data. It's going to be an Excel export. And what we have to keep in mind when we're working with this kind of data. And then I'm going to talk about fact and dimension tables and how we should build the data model. And then within calculations and visuals, I'm going to show how I create S-curves. And then very briefly, I'm going to talk a little bit about accessibility in Power BI, because it's something I try to speak in every session. It's something very important. I want to raise awareness. So yes, Primavera P6 is a project management software used to plan, schedule, and manage complex projects. It's widely employed in industries such as construction, engineering, and infrastructure, and it essentially helps organizations to handle their project work. Primavera P6 comes in two main versions. So we have Primavera EPPM, which is Primavera P6 Enterprise Project Portfolio Management. It's an integrated solution for prioritizing, planning, managing, and executing project programs and portfolios globally. It comprises of two components. One is P6 Web Access and P6 Professional. These applications can be deployed on-premise, on the Oracle Cloud, or other non-Oracle hosted platforms and SQL database. And then we have P6 Professional, that is a component of the EPPM. It can also be deployed as a standalone application, so it's known as PPM. And it's, people also call it like client version or Primavera P6 Professional, because it's a Windows client application and it runs directly from an executable file on the user's computer. As a standalone tool, Primavera PPM is operated from a locally installed database, such as Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server. The also database options, you also have SQLite. And finally, there is also something that for me is fairly new, which is the Oracle Primavera Cloud, which is a cloud-based projects and portfolio management solution. So it offers a bit more features and flexibility compared to the EPPM, but that's all I'm going to touch base on for that. So as database, whenever you're working with Primavera P6, we have Oracle database, SQL, and SQLite. These are the main ones. So Primavera P6 is really, really good for project planning and scheduling. And Power BI elevates data analytics and visualization. You know, it is quite powerful to be able to integrate both. So Power BI's capability to produce interactive and visually appealing reports and transforms complex project data into easily understandable format, and also simplifies the identification of trend patterns and areas of concern. So there are different ways of connecting to Primavera P6. It would depend a lot on the type of database, the type of IT capability you have, if you have certain type of skills, and how much effort or how much budget you have to spend to create a more sophisticated solution. So you have a direct connector from Power BI to Oracle database, as well as the SQL database. There is no direct connector to SQLite, so there is a way around using the ODBC driver. There is also an option to use a REST API. And to be very, very honest with everybody, I have, for the last 3 years that I worked with P6, I've only used export in Excel or CSV. So it really depends how much effort you can put into, and what is your IT infrastructure, what are your capabilities to work on it. So Microsoft Power BI Desktop uses unmanaged Oracle data provider for data access, and you can configure Microsoft Power BI Desktop to access on-premise database and both dedicated and serverless ADB. So this is when we are connecting Power BI to an Oracle database. So first we need to install the Oracle client for Microsoft too, so OCMT, and set up a TNS, which is a transparent network substrate names. Then in Power BI, you can use the get data option to connect to the Oracle database by entering the server and the database names. Then you can enter your credentials. You'll also have the option to write SQL queries to extract the data within Power BI. So it's really, really good because you just have to extract the data you need, and that will help to improve your performance. Also, you have to consider implementing Oracle Advanced Security for enhanced protection. So just talk in terms of data security. If your data is sitting on a SQL server, there is nothing extreme that you have to do. It's just the usual way. So you need to ensure that you have the necessary credentials and that the SQL service is accessible. Set up the connection by entering your server's name and credentials. And again, it's also recommendable that you write SQL queries to retrieve only the fields that are required for your report. I found this one a really interesting way. So if your database is set on a SQLite, there is no direct way to connect to it. Power BI doesn't have a connector to do it, but there is a way around it. So to connect Power BI, you will need to use the ODBC connector. That is the Open Database Connectivity. So you have to install the ODBC driver, configure the ODBC data source in your system, and then connect Power BI to these ODBC data source. You do that by selecting the DSN that you have configured, and then by entering, if required, credentials. And then you can also use SQL queries to extract just the necessary data. So there are quite a few steps involved. There is a really, really good video on YouTube. There is a channel called Microsoft Reactor, and the video is called Connect Power BI with Primavera P6 SQLite Database. Unfortunately, I cannot demonstrate because I don't have in my computer the capability of doing that. But these videos show step by step what you need to do to be able to connect through SQLite. And this is, for me, really interesting. I didn't know you could do it until I heard of a team that did it. They use a REST API to connect to the data. Bear in mind that they had a technical team just to work on this. It wasn't the Power BI developer doing that on their own. It required quite bit more coding skills. So Primavera EPPM provides a REST API. So there is a lot of information available on Oracle website about it. So first you need to then generate an I'm going to apologize, English is not my first language, OAuth. It's a token, and you do that by authenticating the P6 EPPM server. And that can be done sending a post request to the endpoint with your credentials, and the response will include an access token. Then you can use this token to make authenticated requests to P6 endpoints. So you can see here on the first example, these are the endpoints, example what you can do on that regard. And then you get into Power BI. So the way you connect is through the web. So you get data, select the web, and then you enter the URL of the API endpoints. And then you use the token that is as the authentication method. So these are the examples. If you can see here, the get and the paths. And then you can use Power Query to handle the JSON data return from the API, transforming into a tabular format suitable for analysis in Power BI. So when you're working with the API, it's very important to consider error handling. So implement an error.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry.
Yeah, please continue.
Oh, okay. So try to implement an error handling mechanism to manage and log API request failures, ensuring a robust data extraction process. And also consider increment data load. So to minimize the amount of data fetched in each API call. So that will also improve performance and reduce load time. And then finally, I think this is the most straightforward way to connect. It doesn't require much in terms of coding or anything, which is you getting a data export from P6. It can be a CSV or Excel file. Now, in my experience, I had quite a lot of issues working with P6 data in terms of the coding was not entirely correct. And I always had to manually adjust a few bits of the code. So that for me was easier to do in Excel. And I think that's an issue that can happen quite frequently, is that the coding is not correct, and you may have to address that. There are a few things that I like to keep in mind when you're working with data extracts. The first one is ensure proper date formatting. In Primavera, try to configure data format to use 4-digit years. So there are two options, one for 2 digits and one for 4-digit years. So that is to avoid any ambiguity and ensure accurate data handling in Excel. So Excel interprets 2-digit years based on a pivot year. So usually it's 2000 or 1900. So dates like 1st of January 20, they can be interpreted as 1st of January of 2020 or 1st of January of 1920. It would depend on the Excel settings. And Excel uses defaults of to a 100-year range. So typically from 1930 to 2029. So a date like 1st of January of 30 can be interpreted as 1st of January 1930. So it happened to me. I didn't know what was happening. Start seeing dates from 1945. And I was just like, is this real? So I start asking those questions, and I start seeing occurring quite a few times. And that's when I asked to actually see the settings in P6. And I found out that there is this option you can change between the digits for the year. The other thing that's also very important is you only use the necessary data. P6 can have quite a few fields, like more than you actually need. So sit down, think about what fields you actually need for reporting purposes, and try just to get those fields. I think it's quite tempting to try to, I need to have it just in case if I'm going to need in the future, but that will affect a lot the performance of your report. And also consider a consistent naming convention. So if you use data export and the column had a specific name, if you set up your report based on that, if on the following month the column change name, Power BI will give an error because it's not expecting to see that different name. So you can adjust that. So if you know that the fields change for whatever reason, you can adjust that manually in Power BI. But it's just a best practice. It is better to standardize what your data input will be like, so you can standardize your output. And then again, the other thing you should always consider is leverage Power Query. So Power Query is quite powerful. It's quite a powerful tool for data transformation and also very good for data quality control. And to optimize performance, only load the rows and columns that you actually need. So again, there is no need to use all the data if it's not needed for your report. And then establish the relationship. So we're gonna talk about a bit later about fact table and dimension tables. And then you can set up a regular update. You know, if you're gonna have exports in a certain frequency, you can set up in Power BI service a schedule refresh, or you can do it manually if there is no need for a schedule refresh, or if there is no frequency that is predetermined. So I'm going to show quickly, it's going to be like a case study. I'm going to use Power Query for data transformation. Power Query is a data preparation engine in Power BI that allows us to perform quality checks and transformations on the data. And now we'll demonstrate how to transform a P6 extract now. Bear in mind that the data is not real, so it may make not much sense, but it's just the structure of the data and what we can do to make sure that it's in the right format. So I'm going to use the data. Is everybody seeing a Power BI screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I have saved an Excel file, so I'm going to connect to an Excel extract.
I wondered, Juliana, why it did that with the dates. Having Excel set within 100 years or the range within Excel explains why. I was just like, why is it doing that? But that explains that. And
I realize.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, why? But of course, because project data can go on for years and years.
Yeah.
And Azerbaijan said about column shifting as well when you import in, which I've had as well sometimes.
I've seen it. So I've seen, because there were like different planners and each one would do a bunch, and I could see that some were shifted. And I would only know because I was looking the data. I would always have a look because there were quite a few obvious issues that I could spot straight away. So if you can actually see the data, always have a look, do like some exploration. But it happened to me as well, having it shifted by a column. I don't know why it can happen. I've also had a complete random year, like year 3000 and something. I could not find a justification for that. So yeah, it's weird. So I'm gonna, when I open here to select, I'm gonna just select here. I'm not gonna select the table because it's not really a table. So I don't know what it's gonna do. And then instead of loading, that's something that I've noted a lot when I walk around where I work. People, they try to connect the data and they load the data straight away without actually doing any kind of transformation. And P6 files, the way that the data is structured, you will need to do some transformations if you want to make a good use of Power BI analytical capabilities. So I'm going to transform the data, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So there are a few issues with this. So the first one, you can see obviously the header name is not on the right place. That's easily fixed. The other thing that I like to always bring attention everybody who works with P6 data in Power BI. Primavera P6, whenever you have a forecast date that is actualized, it automatically adds an A. And that A, if I try to tell Power BI that this is a date, Power BI will not like it because the A is not really part of the date. The other thing that can happen is there are some special characters that can be used on the date as well, like you have star. There are other fields that I spoke to a planner once. He told me there are other fields that they can use. So I always recommend you to speak to the planners and ask, right, what additional fields will be using on the date columns, because you can future-proof your data, your report by removing all these possibilities. The other thing that you can see on these one that was on purpose, there is an indentation here. So I've seen in some, it wasn't exactly on this type, it was in another column. There was like a space. I don't know why it was added, but we don't want to have this space, and you don't want to remove one by one in Excel, because this is a sample. You can have 50 rows, but I worked with a file that had 25,000. And I was not a chance do it one by one. And the other thing, I kind of combined two different types so that we can have. So I have here data for the it's called here type. So it's BCWS, BCWP, and BCWR. So they are budget cost of work scheduled, budget cost of work performed, and budget cost of work remaining. And I have here the dates, and I have the values for each one of these fields. So this has to be on pivot, and the type has to be pivoted. So I'm going to show you what to do. So the first thing I'm going to do to fix this file is I'm going to make sure that the column name is in the right, is on the header. So in Power BI, on the Home tab, you can just click first row as header. And that's going to be done. So just to show you what Power BI does, Power BI has Power Query has a tab called View. View, and then there are these options here that you can see the column quality, distribution, and profile. The one that can be quite useful for you to have is the column quality. So you can see here because the A's are right on the top. But if I try to set this as the date, it's going to be an error. We can see here. But if it's right on the bottom, you wouldn't know that there was an error. Just bear in mind that the default settings is based on the top 1,000 rows, but you can select it to profile the entire data set. So for me, it's really useful to use these data quality and also distribution. So I'm just going to go back. I don't want to change this yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the A's. So I have these A's on the column start and finished. I need to remove those. So I'm going to show how I do, but you may have if you are a confident user, if you use Power Query, you may have a different thought process, and that's absolutely fine. I think the main information here is we need to get rid of the A before we tell Power BI that that is a date. So the way I do, I just go to transform and I extract before delimiter. And my delimiter is a space and an A. It's going to go away. And I know that got this star in all columns because I created this data set. So I'm going to select all of them. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to extract. And the delimiter now is just this star. I'm going to remove it. So now if I try to tell Power BI that these columns are date, I'm not going to have an issue. So I can tell now. There we go, their date. So you can always go to view, and I don't have, you can see her error here is 0%. I only have 912 rows, so it's within the default values. So something else that I have to do here is I'm going to fix this. I don't want to have any space. So in Power BI, you can just go to transform and trim. That's something you can do it quickly. Now, these two columns here, I don't really need them because they will have totals of the budget cost of work scheduled and work performed. And these totals will be calculated based on the other columns. So they are a bit redundant, so I'm going to remove them. There we go. I'm just going to change the date type. So these are text, so I can set them to text. And I'm going to put this as whole. Right. So now what I'm going to do, I need to get all these columns here that have months, and I need to make it, because they have months and values. So I have to transform them so that I have one column with the months and one column with the values. And to do that, we use the unpivot function. So what I'm going to do, to future-proof my report, because at the moment my project is scheduled to finish in in July of 2030, but that date can be pushed back. And if I select all these columns and there is something added after that, it's not going to be included. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select everything but the month columns, and in transform, I'm going to go to unpivot and unpivot other columns. So if additional columns with months are added, they will automatically be unpivoted as well. So now it creates here two columns. One is called attribute, that's the month, so I can rename this to month. So now what I need to do is, I know that the type is here, and the first value is BCWS, the second one as well. So I need to pivot. I need to have 3 columns, one column for each type. And, so what column is going to be BCWS, and it's going to have the value, and so on. And to do that in Power BI, instead of unpivoting, I'm going to pivot. So I'm going to pivot the column type, and it's going to be based on the column values. And then I will pivot. So there we go. I have 3 additional columns, each one of them with, work scheduled, performed, and remaining. So I can just change I'm just going to put decimal. So after that, my table is ready to be loaded. So I can you can rename it. So export, I'm just going to call. There we go. So you can rename, and it's ready to close and apply, and it's going to load in your data. And then I'm going to come back to these shortly. I'm just going to now go to the next topic, and then we're going to come back to this file. So now this is something that is extremely important, and I've seen quite a lot of people not giving much thought about actually creating a data model. So understanding data modeling is very, very important to create effective reports. In Power BI, we use dimensional modeling, which involves defining tables as either fact table or dimension tables. Fact table contain quantitative data, so they're measurable events. In P6, these would typically include project-related activities, such as forecasts and baseline dates, budget cost of work performed, budget cost of work scheduled, planned worked hours, actual work hours, and so on. Dimension tables contain the descriptive attributes related to the facts. So they help organizing the data into understandable categories, making the data model more intuitive. So a dimension table should always contain a single primary key column, which is used as a foreign key in a relatable fact table. we can see these types of table. I would say, I don't like to do this comparison, but it can help if you're an Excel user. Think about a VLOOKUP when you're trying to find a value in an Excel file. You use VLOOKUP. So each fact or measurement will be associated with multiple dimensions, and this is what we call a star schema. So you can see here in the center, I have my fact table, and it's surrounded by my dimension table. So that is a very common approach for data modeling Power BI. So here we can see the data from multiple tables. So I have here dimension project, WBS, date, supplier, life cycle, and they will be connected to the fact table through a relationship. So each one of these lines here represents a relationship. And then within these relationships, we have the cardinality. The cardinality, you can see here, you have a number 1, and you have here a star. The number 1 means, so you have 4 types of cardinality. One is one to many. So you can see here is an example coming from my dimension table. It's 1 value, so it's unique, and it connects to multiple values from my dimension fact table, sorry, and that's what the star represents. You have many to 1, so that's the other way around. 1 to 1 and many to many. Many to many, I really avoid using it because it can cause quite ambiguity. So if you have many here, it means that they appear in multiple ways and they have different meanings. So when you're trying to look for it, you're not going to know which one to use. So I really avoid. I usually create like a bridge table to handle it, to avoid many to many. But that's a story for another day. And then we have the cross filter direction. So you can see here there is a little arrow pointing to direction. And this is the direction of the relationship, refers to how Power BI will filter the data. So it's going to filter from my dimension table to my fact table. And there are quite a few benefits. So dimension tables reduce the redundancy and improve query performance by centralizing common descriptive attributes. It simplifies the creation of detailed and aggregate reports by providing a structured data model, and also supports advanced analytics like drill downs or roll-ups and pivoting. So when you create a report in Power BI, you can use the dimension tables to slice and dice the data in the fact table. For example, you might want to filter the project activities by the project manager or by the department, for example. So that's something that you can do. For P6, usually there are some key dimension tables. So for example, work breakdown structure, so the WBS. You can have like the WBS ID and then break down to name, description, parent level, and so on. The same for project details, project ID, project name, project manager. I've seen already if it's a place that's if it's a program that's across a large geographical area, you can also have geographical like north, south. You can break into the little details there. Supplier details, project life cycle. So that's just a few examples. And now, this one, I think it's the most important because today we're going to be talking about S-curves. And it's really, really important to have a date dimension table. So a date dimension table ensures uniform date format and consistent handling of data values, simplifying complex calculation and facilitating advanced time-based analysis. And it is essential for creating time-based visualizations and calculations like the S-curves. So in a P6, we usually have these columns here as dates. So we have the start date, we have the finish date, we have a baseline date, and the baseline start date and baseline finish date. And when we have a dimension date table, we're going to create a uniform date context, and that is extremely important. A date dimension table will provide a single consistent point of reference for all date-related columns. This ensures that all date comparison calculations are based on a uniform calendar, and that eliminates discrepancies that might arise from using different date columns directly. So the way that I do, so this is just an example of what I do. You can only have one active relationship between your fact table and the date dimension table. If you try to create another relationship, make it active, you're gonna have an error message saying here there are ambiguous paths between these tables. And what happens is you're gonna have to create, if you see they are dotted, so these are inactive relationships, and that's fine because in Power BI there is a function in DAX called use relationship that you force your calculation to consider those relationships, and then everything's going to be on the same date context. The way I do, so I create the way that I create my date, my calendar column is in Power Query. I open a blank query and I always use this code here. I have it saved on a notebook and I always copy and paste. The only thing I have to change is the start date and the end date. Right. Does anyone have any question until now? Just to make sure that I'm not talking too quickly.
No, there's lots of chit chat in the chat about a couple of people really enjoying the fact that you're going through it nice and simply and showing, some of the transformations that you use within Power Query. And so it's great to see, that nice explanation. And a few people haven't heard of Primavera P6 or haven't used it, so enjoying being able to see the way that it works. And it's exactly like you said, it has nuances. And knowing those nuances can save a lot of time for people if they start working with it in the future. So yeah, no questions for you because everyone's chatting away and enjoying the presentation.
It's great then, thank you. I'll keep going.
Okay, brilliant.
So now I'm going to talk about calculation. So an S-curve is a graphical tool used in project management to track cumulative data over time, such as cost or progress. It helps in visual representation of progress. So the S-curves will provide a snapshot of the project current status in relation to its planned schedule or budget. And it's a clear aid for assessing the project health. Also helps the project managers or project controllers tracking milestones. So by mapping project milestones on the S-curve, project managers can quickly determine if the project is on track to meet critical deadlines or if adjustments are needed. So you can see in advance how well you're doing. And it also is really good to aid on performance monitoring. So you compare the planned progress with the actual progress, allows project managers to identify variances and take corrective actions promptly. So the S-curve has three distinct phases. They have the initial phase, that's right at the beginning, where project activities gradually ramp up with relatively low costs and work output. You have the middle phase with high productivity and resource utilization occur, and it represents the bulk of project work. And then you have the late phase, that's this plateau here. The curve flattens and the project nears a completion. So I'm going to now talk you through how I create these S-curves. Bear in mind that to do these, you will need to have your data model. You will need to have your data dimension table connected to your fact table. And then you're going to need to use that to create the measures that you're going to put on the visuals. So for creating the S-curves, we have to count. So I'm going to do this example, I'm going to use activity starts. So I'm going to assess the date of the activity should have started. The same thought process you can apply for milestones, for earned value, or for activity finishes. So initially, I'm going to just use DAX to calculate the sums. I just use a filter here just because I want to exclude if there is any blank. So the column that I'm doing the count, that is the baseline start, that's the one that is got an active relationship with my dimension date here. So that is absolutely fine. When you start calculating on the columns that they have the inactive relationship, so in this case here is the current doing the start. Yes, the date current start. So that is inactive. So to be able to bring it to the same context as the other column, I will use the function use relationship. So I'm going to force Power BI to make this relationship that is inactive, it's going to be active. So that's how I'm going to do. So I'm just doing 4 activity starts. The last stage is creating the cumulative totals. So to do that, I'm going to use these measures that I created previously, and I'm going to use the function calculate. That's very useful in Power BI, and I'm going to use a filter here, and it will modify the filter context. And for the all selected, I'm going to remove any existing filter on this date dimension, and I'll keep the context created by any slicer of filters applied on the report. So what I'm doing here, it looks back from the current date within the context, and cumulative the values update to the current date. So that's with all of these all selected lookup date and lookup from today until the max. So that's what it is doing. So it pretty much focuses on a cumulative count to a point in time. So now I'm going to show you quickly. So I'm gonna cheat just for a matter of time. So I created my measures. So they use the same thought process that I explained. So I have my count in month for the activity started. So count rows, and I'm using the use relationship because the relationship on the forecast date is inactive. The count in month for the baseline start, I don't need to use the user relationship because the relationship is already active. So I don't need to do that. And then once I have these two, I will create the cumulative calculation for the actual started and the cumulative for the baseline started. So to do, I'm not gonna add like it was on this slide with the monthly values because I think it gets quite too much on one visual, but it's an option that you have. So I'm just gonna create a normal line chart. On my x-axis, I'm gonna use the end of month. And then I'm gonna use my cumulative values. I'm just going to configure it a bit better. Yeah. So you can see it doesn't look like an S-curve because the data is not real, but that's the idea. So you can see how much has been done. If you are behind, the actual curve will be under the plan, and you can see how much it is. What I've done in a project before, it was also adding like 3 months to the date. So if to kind of know what we're going to be if there is this kind of delay. So we'll have an S-curve, another curve here that will be with plus 90 days. So that can be done in Power Query. You can create an additional column, and and it's going to be like a date add function. And then you create inactive relationships and you do the counts. So that's something interesting as well you can do to assess different scenario. Like, okay, there is a massive delay and we need to assess what we're going to be. So that's something you can do as well. So yes, that's it. You can also, if you want to add like a reference line, there is an option on the format reference line. So I want to add a line and it's going to be X. And I actually created a measure called today. That's literally just today. And then there we go. You can then configure how you want and add the data label, and it can be the date or the name. So you can call it today. So that's something that can work. This data, it's from last year, so it's not, that's why it's not showing anything. And then I'm going to come back here. And I'm going to talk quickly about something that I always try to talk on my sessions, about accessibility in Power BI. So specifically color accessibility. So when we design reports, it's really important to consider that. There are approximately 350 million people worldwide that experience some sort of color blindness, and use it's really important to consider the use of accessible colors, which is a combination of colors with enough contrast that ensure that all users can distinguish elements on a page. Power BI offers built-in accessibility features like keyboard navigation, screen reader compatibility, and high contrast colors. But there is a lot of work that we can do to make sure, for example, that the screen readers can read the data, everything that is in the screen. They can make sure that people can see the difference if there is color used to communicate important information. So yes, and we have the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, it's called WCAG. It provides clear recommendations on how to make content accessible for everyone. Usually I try to always do my reports considering the contrast of 4.5 to 1. Ideally, we should always try to use accessible colors as BAU, like, that's the standard, but it's quite difficult because sometimes we have branding guidelines and color conventions like RAG, red, amber, and green. That's really, really commonly used to report performance and progress. So Power BI also offers a selection of accessible themes, but I tested the themes and I can see that the combination of these colors are not necessarily accessible. So I tested, here's one of the themes, and the top line here is the color with the hex code. And I tested on a colorblind simulator, and you can see that you can barely see the difference between some of the colors. So always bear in mind, if you're going to use those themes, make sure you see which colors can go together on a visual. And it's quite annoying sometimes as well, because Power BI only allows you to choose one theme, and it can be, you have to choose, what am I going to use? So you usually end up duplicating efforts to make sure that it's accessible. I just did here a quick simulation of the RAG color, so red, amber, and green. And I put here like an alternative RAG colors that you can clearly see distinction between the different bands. The reason I talk about it is because I once worked with a stakeholder for 6 months, and I didn't know that he was colorblind, and all my reports we used RAG colors. And he was always asking me, what's happening here? And I got really annoyed. And after 6 months, I was like, right, what's wrong? And he told me, oh, sorry, I'm colorblind. I can't see the difference. For me, it looks all the same. And I think I've never felt so ashamed in my life.
Bless you.
It's haunting me for years until I found I was capable enough to do something about. I have to learn about it. It's quite overwhelming when you start learning about it, but there is a lot of guidelines out there. And I also use these. There is a website, it's called WebAIM. They can check the contrast between foreground and background. So for example, if you're going to have text icons on the top of a colored background, you can always check. Ideally, we should aim for, the WCAG has 3 levels of compliance. We should ideally aim for the AA, that is a strong accessibility, where the contrast ratio between foreground and background is 4.5 to 1. I'm going to show quickly what I've done for a client. Of course, it's not the work I created for the client. I kind of replicated, I selected really bad colors intentionally so you can see the difference. So this is like the report created using the main branding colors. It's quite common as well to have a risk matrix, and the risk matrix usually have rag colors. And then what I did, I created a toggle button that would toggle into a view that I would use accessible colors. So I spend more time finding the right colors than actually replicating the visuals. It is based on bookmarks. You do have to duplicate. There is a bit of a duplication of work, but for me, it was worth. So I spent extra couple of hours doing that. It was a really, really big report. There were about 20 tabs. And I went through everyone. I didn't have to create a secondary visual for all of them, just for the ones that had a low contrast. So yeah, so I put on a little toggle so people could do that on their own discretion, because based on my past experience, people will not raise their hands and say, sorry, I'm colorblind. So I just leave that so people can do on their own time. And the other thing I've done is when you have a table, I try to use icons as well as color, because they can see at least that there is a difference. And I put a legend here saying what it means. So when I created my toggle button, I only had to change 2 visuals, because the other one was it's a standard view. It was the accessible view. So yes, that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, judging by the request for your PowerPoint file, Juliana, I think they found it very, very useful.
Lily, I can send a PDF to you too, and then you can distribute, no problem at all.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, if you send the PDF, I'll pop it into, we've got a GitHub site. The links are on the meetup group, and so I can pop it in there, and I'll also put a copy of the recordings. You've got a very, very, very times 1,000 from Takimi, but I think for all of us that have used project data, it's really lovely to see it explained so clearly and concisely. And I love the accessibility bit at the end. So that's really good. Takimi's asking if you have a YouTube channel. I think Juliana's full-time working and a mum, and she also has a passion for STEM and encouraging women into science, technology, engineering, and maths. So
I'm gonna be launched soon a website, but it's gonna be mainly combining UI design with WCAG framework, and see how you can use in data analytics. So it's coming soon. It's just I have too many side projects, and it's summer holiday for my son, and I am working double shift. But yeah, it's coming. I'll let you know when it's out. But I want to add more ideas of how you can create visuals using UI, UI design framework, and also considering accessibility. And I will also have a page for teenagers, so they can start having a foundation in data visualization and considering accessibility as well.
Yeah, that was absolutely brilliant, Juliana. I'm so thrilled for you. That was really, really clear, very easy to understand, and you explained some, quite in-depth concepts, like all selected very, very easily. So I know there's, a huge amount of support, and thank you in the chat for you sharing your knowledge for us. Any last questions, and anyone, before we wrap it up for today? But thank you, Juliana, and I really appreciate you doing this, because I know how busy you are at the moment.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And
hang on, Fernando's put a question. I don't know, Fernando. What question? Fernando, question up. You have to repeat it, Fernando. He thinks I can multitask about 20 things. I don't know the question you asked. Can you add a zoom slide? Thank you, Fernando. Can you add a zoom slider to the line chart?
Yeah, so I did that on my, I forgot to show. So I have, I'm going to share again. I created, because I found it's quite cluttered, these visual. So I created a zoom button that it will actually, there we go. It's going to show a zoom of that. So I've done
Nice.
something similar for different features. But I actually had a colleague to test this. He's colorblind, and he said, I really don't like it because it's got too much going on, and it's a really small visual. So I just created. So that was a feedback from him. I didn't think about that initially, but I created these little button here that it will hover over, and you can have a bigger picture.
How do you do that?
So it's a combination. I have here a measure.
So bookmark.
No. Yeah. The measure that I configure as transparent, because the measure, if you add a card, you can add a tooltip page, and then I put at the top of the icon. So that is simple as that. So 2 little bits of visuals.
That is so effective. I love that. Absolutely love that. Really nice. Fernando, you've got your hand up. I love that. I love that.
Juliana, could you show us the other line chart that you created today?
So I just created these for today. So one is the earned value, and the other one is the.
Could you select one, please?
Yeah.
And then go to Format.
Oh, okay.
On the right panel.
Yeah.
And then add a zoom slider.
Oh, you want the slider for the zoom?
So down a bit.
In the middle. Below grid lines?
Yeah.
There, in the x-axis?
Yeah. I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't like sliders. On the visual, because so what I do, I usually create, so that is like a summary page. So I will probably add something like that on the detail view, because the visuals are bigger. I've done it before. I've added, instead of that, I also had like, do you know the date one? You can also change the range on a slide as well, but it's on a slicer. So that one so far has been more commonly asked by.
Yes, maybe it's a configuration or something, because 1970 appeared, but as they are so close, the actual and planned lines, it could help eventually to have this zoom slider.
Yeah, this data is not real, so but just keep that in mind. So it makes sense, but I have to kind of create something that I could share. So it may not make much sense for that reason.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Process is that.
Sometimes that's a bigger challenge, isn't it? Creating the meaningful. I've been back and forth with ChatGPT. Can you create this data where it will allow me to show this and show a trend and a spike? And it's it's a challenge. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Juliana. I love that little.
It's very effective.
It's very, very effective. Very simple and very effective. And it's these little things are the little gems that we take away with us. So thank you everyone for joining. Next week we have Peter talking to us about incremental refresh in Power BI. Peter had the joy of sitting next to me at breakfast at SQL Bits, and we got chatting, and he's Dutch and he wants a chance to practice his English, and he's absolutely brilliant. So I hope you can join us next Tuesday when we talk all about incremental refresh. Thank you very much, everyone. And well done, Juliana. Absolutely brilliant. You rock. You rock. So I'm going to stop recording now, and let me press stop because quite often I forget. Stop. So Juliana is going to send me a PDF